Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to Cuberviews, episode 17. This is your host, Ian Braverman. Today I am joined by Uber Bear himself, Anthony Adams. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm really excited. I'm a regular listener, first time on the show, so I'm super hyped. This is something I was looking forward to.
Yes, I've been really looking forward to this episode also. When we met at CubeCon a couple years ago, I played your artifact cube. I drafted this crazy KCI combo, like egg style combo, weird crazy deck. And right afterward, I came up to you and Stu and I was like, look at this deck. It's awesome. And so that after that, I was like, oh, this is great. You're really nice. And so I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, and the KCI combo in that cube is the live the dream portion of that cube. And it actually came up again this season. We have another individual that chased that dream and it fell a little short for them. So it actually kind of caused me to rethink those type of really fragile strategies in my cube environments. And I added in a bunch of support mechanisms in order to protect those strategies. Things that would allow like protection from artifacts till end of turn. Target creature gets indestructible till end of turn. So from people like yourself pioneering that deck, because that is an extremely audacious deck, it's allowed me to learn more about my cube. So thank you.
I love going for just the crazy shenanigans in cube and going 0-3. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
totally here for it.
We're trying to make that the 3-0 deck. That's the dream. That's the dream.
Yes, excellent. You are the host of UberCube, and you have been doing the podcast for a few years, co-hosted with Stu and May. And tell us about it.
Well, so May's the real host of Ubercube. The rest of us just follow her lead. But yes, Stu and I had a back porch dream about almost 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years in May, actually, that we started the podcast. And we sat around and we talked so much about Cube and argued and deliberated. And, there's a point where you realize no one's listening or learning from anything we're saying except for Stu and I, and neither of us are actually learning anything from each other. So we decided, I said, hey guys, let's just take all this energy, positive, negative, everything, let's bundle it up. Let's put a microphone in front of our faces and see how it sounds. So here we are.
Yeah, I totally get that. One of my favorite parts about doing Cuberviews has been learning from the guests. So I totally get it.
Yeah, those little tips and tricks. You and I were talking about one about Audacity before, and I had people coach me on stuff. That 30-second little trick that I was talking about, like getting that little wave file in the beginning so you could find all the ambience. Someone else taught me that when I had them on the show because they had police cars and sirens going by and everything, and I couldn't figure out how to get those little bumps out of there. And it was really frustrating trying to learn that software. So, yeah, having guests is actually a great learning opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you do outside of magic and for work?
Well, I'm an energy engineer. I work for a company out of Texas. We'll leave that right there because, I have to separate, my work life and all that. But I've been doing building automation and programming and sustainability now for about 26 years. So I travel around the country doing that while trying to podcast. That's why on rare occasions you'll hear me with some iPhones plugged into my head, just talking with the worst audio you've ever heard because I'm in a hotel room in Yonkers, New York, trying to do a podcast. But it is the life. And then regarding hobbies, most people don't know this about me, and I've got to bring it back up again. I was a huge mud runner. Like I was a mud run junkie, and I actually for the last 3 years since I've been podcasting have taken a break. I'm gonna get back into it. But like Rugged Maniacs, Tough Mudders, Spartans, stuff like that, it's just like a huge thing that I got really addicted to. I would do like 3 or 4 Spartans a year and something I just really enjoyed. Once this thaw melts and a little bit of my 47-year-old waistline melts, I'm going to start doing it again because it's just something I enjoy outside of magic.
That's so awesome. And if you're ever traveling for work and you're in Connecticut, let me know. I'll plug it every episode. We cube every week at Games IRL in Avon, Connecticut. We definitely want you to come and cube with us.
I think by the time this rolls out, I will be, strangely enough, in Yonkers outside of White Plains, New York. So if there's anybody out in that area, because I'm gonna be bored out of my mind and probably snowed in doing some work. So anywho, yeah, it is the engineering life.
Yes, definitely. And what is your libation of the show today?
Oh, I did bring one actually. I have me a Lafroig. It's a oaked select 12-year-old single malt scotch. How about yourself?
I have a cup of water.
There we go. Well, I got a backup water too, but I really needed to finish the scotch. That way I can get another bottle.
Yes, of course. And today we are discussing the Uber Bears Horror Cube. Tell me about this cube. Why did you build it? What was the inspiration?
I thought about this when I saw your question, you sent me some show notes and I put a lot of thought into it. Interestingly enough, this is my first inspiration for Cube. I had previously taken on, and we joked about this on an episode on UberCube, a disaster of a popper cube, where our good friend Samich, aka Chris, and I got that totally backwards, actually has like the most high performing popper cube I've ever seen in my life. And I was thinking I could do this as well. So I put every seal of something in there, every protection source in there that I could add to this cube. It was just everything that was common, I slapped into this popper cube. It was a total disaster. It also didn't feel like me. It had no identity. At the time, what I was seeing in my group, and all this was sandwich, was I believe his power cube was out. I believe his popper cube was out. Later, his peasant cube would come. So basically, like that hierarchical growth of the common, we'll just say common, uncommon, and we'll call it the broken, mythic, rare nonsense, whatever you want to call it, right? But that's what my play group actually was surrounded by. And I was thinking, what could I do to demonstrate my identity and my artistic thoughts? And one day it popped in my head, like, well, so what I'm going to try to do is build a cube based on factions. And how could I make that work? But I really didn't like Typal or Kindred at the time. It really wasn't my jam, believe it or not. But how could I put a spin on it? So I was pondering and kind of overthinking it, right? I had a lot of drive time. It's funny, a lot of my cubes come from drive time. I think this one might have been like I'm driving through the Shenandoah Valley and I should have been looking at the skyline instead of pondering on a cube idea. And this one I was thinking, wow, what if I could do elves? And what if I could do goblins? And maybe I could do like some constructs or something. Like I kind of do this typal spin. And how could I make them all fight each other in this huge conflict or war? And then I got really bored of it. I'm like, that just seems like I'm going to have a hard time with a lot of armies, locking horns with another little small army. And the only thing I can get through was combat tricks and overruns, etc. And then I thought, well, I also enjoy horror. And if you listen to the show a lot, you'll hear Stu and I kind of debate about what's the greatest horror film of all time, which is clearly Aliens, even though it's a science fiction film. And he debates Alien, but also like the Apocalypse trilogy by John Carpenter, which would be The Prince of Darkness. It would be The Thing and also In the Mouth of Madness. These are huge films that I really enjoy. How could I take the Apocalypse trilogy and make it into a cube, a John Carpenter type of vibe, but meets Bram Stoker, meets Lovecraft, which is he's a huge jerk, and meets Mary Shelley, right? What could I do to amalgamation of these ideas? And I remember drafting Innistrad and actually falling in love with it. So the cube kind of from that thought kind of began to build itself, right? From the ether, I pulled it out of the nebulous and while driving through the mountains when I should have been staring at mountains. So over time, it became a cube. And also a little further to that point, it went right back to the same problem that we talked about with the goblins and the elves. Even if you swap them out for zombies and vampires, they were still little creatures. They had to have special abilities, and they really kind of looked samey or played samey. So then I integrated the idea of kind of a power maximum idea. What could I do to insert some staples from, my commander era, stuff like preordain and ponder and counterspell and mystic confluence and all these cards. And what could I do to like push these levels, give some mana rock, signets or whatever later became talisman because they're creepier. But so what you're looking at for the final product is kind of the kindred, the war of the humans versus the spirits versus et cetera, werewolves, right? Which we'll talk about that later. But I wanted to give them more tools in that cube, that more edge, more bite to make them power max, push harder, right? So the players basically have a full palette. Anything that they want, they can build. They're not completely restricted to, well, I just got to build a vampires deck that feels very constructed.
And going back to like your first cubes that you built, like having a popper cube, my first cube was my peasant cube. I tried Soul Ring, Mana Drain. I was like, oh, I'm gonna build the high power, uncommon common cube, and it was a total mess. I've since then built many messes of a cube. So
That's part of the process, I think.
yes, and what you said about I think that when you're really inspired by something and it's something that you really love, it's a passion project, it comes out better. When people are doing a job that they hate, I think that they don't do as good work. If you love your job, you're going to do it and you're going to do a great job. And if you love horror, then you're going to do a great horror cube. So I think that that's a really great story behind it.
Yeah, and I really leaned into Cavs Fangelo has the Cthulhu Cube, which we recently had him on the show as well too. And it was really cool to kind of see the differences in our design philosophies between the two of us and where we landed on the spectrum of what's horror, what's not horror. I leaned more into the gothic horror, and Cavs leaned more into the idea of the cosmic horror. By us speaking to one another on the show, I've since branched out from there. And if the listeners in the background hear like a nice rushing water sound, and you can keep this in, it's because I recently for Christmas got it's one of those little vessels that's self-watering and adds all that so I can grow basil and mint and whatever in time. So that's running in the background. So that should be peaceful for your white noise.
Sounds great. And that's a great segue into what does it mean to be a horror cube? Does that mean that you're going for like an overall horror vibe? Do all the cards in the cube have to have a horror feeling? And like you said, there's many different types of horror. It can have many meanings, like sci-fi horror, gothic horror, supernatural horror. Is there like a specific type of horror that you're going for, or more of an all-encompassing feeling?
Originally, it was Gothic horror. It was very Bram Stoker meets Mary Shelley, which are two of my favorite writers and favorite, I love Dracula and I love Frankenstein. And I really wanted to incorporate that and kind of even going into the little bit of the Abbott and Costello versus the werewolf and versus the mummy. We're going super old here. You'll have to probably YouTube those scratchy old grainy videos at this point. But this is some of my childhood. As a matter of fact, and I think I talked about this, sometimes I'm going to repeat things that we've talked about, but the first horror film that ever scared me when I was a kid. I believe it was the 1958 Steve McQueen version of The Blob. And I remember watching that at my Aunt Jackie's house. The door had shut behind me, and I'm watching TBS, which is super like family friendly, right? This movie absolutely terrified me. I couldn't get out from underneath the blankets while watching this movie. Had to finish it. Couldn't look away, right? Something about that. The fact that that movie had, and it's such a beach blanket bingo terrible film after rewatching it, but something about the how that genre captured me, how it drew me into it, how it took me out of my element. I'm just in some random bedroom as a little kid here in Savannah, Georgia, and now I've been lifted into this terrible, like the blob is now taking over this teenage infested town or whatever, and with drag racing and bingo and 50s shag music. But it's something about that it could take you out of your element. It can unsettle you a little bit. The way that it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. And that's how I want this cube to feel. You can play it, you can have fun, you can min-max, you can just play it, or you can vibe with it, right? You can play some classic music from, say, Nightmare on Elm Street in the background while playing it. We do it every Halloween, and we'll jam out the Kill Kill Die Die from Friday the 13th in the background. Everything that's unsettling, setting a tone, right? The lights are dimmed while drafting, and something about that cube while flicking through those cards, it's kind of like reading a horror novel.
Yeah, definitely. And there are many magic planes that I would consider to be horror or horror themed. For example, Innistrad, which is definitely inspired by gothic horror themes like vampires, werewolves, spirit, zombies, and Phyrexia, the biomechanical horror
Yeah, it's
world.
body horror. I
Yeah,
mean, that's disturbing. Yeah.
and Amonkhet, which is like mummified undead, eternal servitude. We just got Duskmorn, which is like the demonic vibes, the modern horror set based on a haunted house. And then also many other sets just kind of have horror built into them. Like, for example, Ravnica with the Demir or Rakdos cult or the Golgori swarm. Tell me about the different sets that you have pulled cards from to build this horror vibe.
So the largest harvest that I have done is literally from the Innistrad plane. Every iteration of it has been some kind of upgrade for this cube. But Duskmorn is the first portion that literally unlocked my thinking and kind of just took me out of that comfort zone where I'm getting too comfortable in the gothic horror realm. And I wanted to change it up a little bit. And you said it, something about that plane. And I wish we could go back and I wish we'd stayed there for three sets, not because of my own, greedy purposes of wanting more cards for my cube, because it would be expensive, but something about the storytelling that that house had could have been more, right? That reminded me of like People Under the Stairs, or it reminded me of a Nightmare on Elm Street type of vibe. That's where they kind of reached into that 80s horror, and they didn't do just like the cheesy horror. They kind of lead into the slasher films and back to that Apocalypse trilogy that I was talking about before by John Carpenter. So I think those two worlds can survive together very comfortably. And at first, I was a little uncertain of whether or not I wanted to make this amalgamation, right? It looks a little weird to have some classic Gothic, just say some werewolf, right? Sitting next to some kind of like cosmic terror from those overlords that they made, the ones that had the impending. But after I pondered it for a while, those are equally unsettling. Basically, anything that would be in your nightmares, it goes in this cube, right? Back to what you were asking about the other planes, the reason why I didn't do like the idea of new phyrexia and all that, that's the body horror and all that, because it just has some mechanics. I didn't want to do infect and do all these. I may in a later iteration, but I didn't want to incorporate, I wanted to keep this tight knit 360. And I swear to you, the longest time I thought about it over and over again. Should I go past 360 with this cube? But the problem that I had with this is keeping these archetypes, aristocrats or self-mill or these other things that I'm trying to do that are very Innistrad in their nature. Not necessarily, but they are for the most part. I needed those to stay compacted and playable so that you could get the pieces you needed. And if I wanted to expand the universe and go 540, for example, it wouldn't hurt the cube. It just would make it more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like gummy, stretchy. It would make it
Diluted.
so, yeah, diluted is even better word, right? It would make it so that kind of the theme, the mythos, the plane that I'm trying to design outside of Innistrad and now Duskmourn and some other incorporations would feel more diluted. That's a much better word.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I feel like there's many ways you could build a horror cube. You could focus
Oh
more
yeah.
on Phyrexia. There are horror cubes that are literally just called Innistrad set cubes, and then
Yeah.
those are basically a horror cube, but
I
they're
mean, a
all
Gonjo,
Innistrad.
was it a Gonjo Drift or whatever? It's coming out soon. That's basically going to be Christine by Stephen King. I mean, if you really want to go super stretchy, I mean, anything's a horror cube. You can bend it. Our good friend Nathan has a Ghostbusters cube because he's into the kind of the campy, funny horror aspects of the Ghostbusters universe. And while he's looking at my horror cube, he's building something that's kind of adjacent, but he wants to have it such a unique identity that they don't feel samey. Then when he looks at my list, he tries not to pick too many cards that I have in his. So they look very, mine's kind of the mental gets inside of you, latches onto you, makes you unsettle. His is going to be kind of like, okay, that's kind of funny. That's kind of campy. It's very like Evil Dead-ish, right? He's looking for that art. So we're in two different types of the horror genre. To answer your question, it's very possible to build a multitude of horror cubes based off of any plane you want. It's that reader-writer relationship. You're trying to convey a message. If people can feel that dread, or they can laugh at it like Scooby-Doo. Build a Scooby-Doo cube literally with Dustmorn by not, omitting all the others and use those 80s kind of zany characters they had in there.
Yeah, and speaking of Ghostbusters or Scooby-Doo, we get so many universes beyond now. Like for example, Fallout. That has some scary stuff if you play that game.
It does. I love it. I'm actually trying to finish New Vegas now for the past 12 years. Eventually, I'll quit. The problem I have with those games, and I used to play Oblivion and finished it all the way through, and then I played Fallout 3 and finished every expansion and every DLC that came out, did all that. And then comes about the new Fallout, or for me, it was New Vegas. It wasn't new, but I wanted to play it, and I've been just stuck on it for about 12 years now. I played it this past weekend. I'll never finish it.
Fallout New Vegas has got to be one of my favorite games
It won't
ever.
let
I
me
love
go.
that
I'm so
game.
nervous to like choose a faction and make everybody mad. I was trying to be the cool guy and please everyone. Then I realized no one likes me. It's pretty great.
Yes, and the TV show is great too. I'm very excited for the
Oh, I
next
loved
season.
it. I'm excited. Yeah, season two is coming soon. I'm hyped for that.
And tell me about some of your favorite cards in this cube do you think portray the feeling of horror in the most idealistic way for you?
So to answer your question, I'll kind of give you one from each of the color pies, if that's fair, right? Because
Yeah,
each one of these is going to have a unique identity. So I've got some that are very new here, and one of the ones that I have that I think, and this is it actually might be tied for two. I'm gonna give you two for the white section. I'm gonna say Selfless Spirit with the Secret Lair art, which is really just really amazing, and it's a very powerful looking piece of art. Whoever painted this, absolutely gorgeous. But as far as like the creep and making you feel uncomfortable, I got that new White Orchid Phantom. I think this came out in Modern Horizons 3, and they had an alternate art that's like this screaming looking banshee spirit.
oh yeah,
It's
the
a
Richard Kane Ferguson art.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Yeah, that art is just kind of really exemplifies what I'm trying to do in this cube. And then if I kind of roll over into my blue section, if I had to say something that was really unsettling, it's probably gonna be Dungeon Geist. That art is literally like three spirits dragging a person downstairs, wrapped, almost borderline mummified, wrapped in chains. And this person's wide awake trying to shout for help. It's not coming. So it just gives off this unsettling, uncomfortable, cringy vibe. It's hard to ignore. And that card's just uber powerful. And then I go into my black section, and I've had to pick one that I think is just really epitomizes black. I'm gonna probably, this is a little bit of a weird one. I'm gonna have a part two for this one also. I'm gonna go with the Sir Conrad the Grim alternate art. It's a secret lair that I have. That's,
Ooh,
have you seen this? It's absolutely stunning.
I'm just
It's,
seeing it now.
yo, yeah, this art is sick. It is by Mark Riddick. I think I said that right. And then another one that's like really disturbing is the Three Weird Sisters. That's something I should mention here too. This is the one cube where I fully embraced the double-sided magic cards. I actually wanted to do that. I mean, at this point, werewolves were doing it, other things were doing it from Innistrad. I just said, you know what? I'm just going to go deep with this idea. I know people don't like taking cards out of sleeves, flipping them over, but the Three Weird Sisters on the other side of the card, have you ever seen the both sides of this? It's absolutely disturbing. It's
Yeah,
just,
that art is freaky.
oh yeah, it's unsettling as all get out. So those are kind of modern. And then I'll kind of transition over. This is a new one that I'm in love with that I think's unsettling. It's from Dustmorn. It's Clockwork Percussionist. It's the little monkey beating on the drum that's alive. But you look in the background, I have the alternate art. There's two arts for this. Most people didn't know it. But if you look in the back of the monkey, off in the right-hand corner, you'll see like this entity. There's a shadow creature in the back. So it's very unsettling. It looks like a toy. It's definitely not a toy.
No.
And then if I go into my green section, and I know I'm going a little long here, but these cards kind of tell the story of the cube. I'm going to say Under the Skin. This is also from Duskmorn. It's when the gentleman's looking at the mirror and he's seeing half his face and the other half is literally like this infectious demon that's taken over him. Something about these cards just really tell the story. Does that answer your question fairly? I mean, it's each one of them are evocative of what I'm trying to portray in this art, this art form.
Absolutely. And a couple cards for me that I think are scary to me are Thing in the Ice.
Oh yeah.
I think that that card is awesome. When I was in Germany, I opened up a German pack and I opened up Das Ding I'm Ice. So that just brings back memories for me too. And I don't know, that's just the idea of just things in the ice, whether it be a monster or some parasite that's going to end the world. Just that whole idea scares me. And also Stitcher Supplier. I just think that the secret layer art is so funny with the
Oh
little
yeah.
dog with his
The
foot.
little dog. Yeah, yeah. That was kind of me going a little bit of the Evil Dead type thing. It's a little cutesy, it's a little funny, it's a little puppy with the zombie's leg in its mouth. So I'm
Yes.
I'm definitely reaching in a little bit there. So yeah, it was just a way to kind of put a little bit of personality into the cube, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned a couple of them, but tell me about some of the different themes and archetypes in here. Like I was looking at your Cube Cobra write-up. It says like spirits tempo, vampire and human aggro, zombie self-mill, werewolf mid-range, is it flashback? Tell me how you decide upon these archetypes and how they fit into the theme.
I would say Wizards actually did most of this for me, right? A lot of these cards kind of fall into, Gruul is going to be mid-rangey, Boros is going to be aggro. I mean, it's kind of the guilds that we've learned from Ravnica, I guess, extended. And I would say the Innistrad was a very Ravnica extended guild-based type of environment, right? I mean, it's very color-centric. Azorius was spirits, humans were Selesnya. You get where I'm going with this. Dimir was kind of falls into that zombie apocalypse type of idea. So using kind of the signposty idea of choosing my guild cards, and I think I have three to four. I don't have it right in front of me right now. I use those to drive my archetypes in this cube. So, in this case, you'll see me kind of break a few of these. You were asking me if I would go outside of the Innistrad world. I do have a Ravnica card in here, and it's in my Selesnya section. And this was an art first kind of idea. This is Glare of the Subdual for two colorless and Selesnya. Get an enchantment. Tap an untapped creature you control, tap target artifact or creature. And this art is literally like a human, I guess the hero that we have standing over these looks like orcish hordes, maybe zombie, maybe demonic hordes. It's just enough in the artistic realm of what I'm trying to do, and the art's not clearly defined that I put it in there to give kind of the humans that idea that they can get like this opposition light type of card and give them a build around. But anything can use this, right? Like it's splashable, but it does fall in kind of the humans, green and white section that can also splash in the werewolves, etc. But it does allow you to have those creature-based strategies that do have the ability to attack in, turn sideways, but then they can use this card to tap and untap creature you control, and then tap target artifact to allow, blockers to be removed from the battlefield.
I love Glare of Subdual. That's just a card I've wanted to put into cubes for a while and haven't found a home yet. Really cool card. And another question that I have for you is tell me about how strictly you adhere to the theme. You already mentioned it earlier in the episode. Want it to be this a high power kindred and themed cube. But for example, in my proliferate cube, I tried to be as strict as possible when I first built it, having basically only cards that have to do with counters. But then over time, I realized that there were just some effects that didn't have pure counter cards that fit well. For example, cheap counter spells or cheap removal. I ended up putting in a few cards that weren't exactly having to do with counters just to flesh out the themes. And in this cube, you do have some cards that I would say are similar to that. For example, having like counterspell or cryptic command or lightning bolt. Is it because there isn't enough efficient interaction or powerful themed cards to be able to contend on the power level you're going with for the horror themed threats?
Yes, and I would say that there's a certain point as a curator we have to make a decision when we're going to allow theme to totally dictate the cube versus actual play, right? And so, yeah, I wanted these games to be expedited. I wanted them to be done by turn, let's say maximum turn 8. I wanted these games to come to an end and be kind of snappy and not drag on forever. And I didn't want to take the power level so low that it felt very much like I was doing a pre-release and I wanted to feel more like my version of a cube. And my play group in particular, frankly, would have gotten bored if I had done an Innistrad purist cube. They like the integration of the preordained. They like the powerful magic. And I think sometimes us as curators also get lost in the sauce with that too, that I also have to build my cube for the individuals that are going to enjoy playing it. It's not that I didn't either, right? Literally, it's a type of play that I wanted to. So when you're seeing these staples integrated in there, and like you said, lightning bolt, right? May's talked about lightning bolt ad nauseum at this point and how it's way too powerful for every cube, and I do not disagree with that. But I'll also say that it's only a one-time spell without Snapcaster Mage, which is definitely in this cube. But it does remove a lot of threats, but it doesn't remove all the threats. I also run Force of Will in here too, which I've argued is, in my opinion, the most flexible card in all of Magic, and people are going to lose their minds when I'm saying that, as in it can transition to a multitude of power levels and go unnoticed. It's only as powerful as the biggest threat that you have, and it's hyper dependent on that, very much leaning into the blue aspect of a cube, right? So it's a highly expandable card that has a lot of rich texture to it that players like. There's two different types of Magic players. I see this come up a lot, and there's somewhere in the middle. I'm somewhere in the middle. But there are those individuals that want to be very purist and follow the canon of their cube and the story they're trying to tell. And then you have the other ones that are just going to be mechanics first and everything else comes second. I land right in the middle. I really want to have this thematic design, but I also want to promote the mechanics and the replayability. And by giving these big splashy spells that seem out of place, but they're not. I chose the art. The art makes them in place. But power max level, they're not. They are individual little spikes on that spectrum, right? You won't see any Jittes in here, and you're not going to see a Soul Ring in here. But a counter spell, again, will get them one time, but it's not that offensive, right? I could go to something that costs any kind of 3 mana counter spell and throw it in there, right? I could do a cancel. But my play group's not going to want to draft a cancel. They'll pass that and they'll take something else over it. And I don't know if that's a bad thing. I'm just telling you that's going to happen.
My playgroup is pretty similar. If they see like some 4 mana destroy target creature, proliferate sorcery in black, they say, "What are you doing? Just put in Hero's Downfall. Stop with the theme. Relax."
Yeah, now they'll if they know the theme is like I've got my Monopoly and they know the theme rampant across the whole thing, it's organic. So now you're paying 5 for a removal spell. They have that level of acceptance when they do. But if I brought something to them like this and it felt like they were playing a pre-release, their boredom levels would be on the clock pretty fast. I wouldn't get replayability. So then I get to try to push the envelope on what is acceptable to be in this middling power level of a cube, right? It could look weird for people to see it, but I'm a huge proponent of putting those spikes in there for the spikes. So that the Timmys and the spikes and the Vorthos and everybody has something they can do. If it's not your cup of tea, then you can pass it, which I wouldn't, but you could, right? I mean, the choice is in the draft.
Yeah, the Vorthos players can take all the cool werewolves and zombies, and me as the Spike. I'll just go blue-eye control with swords to plowshares and counterspell and have a great time.
Our good friend Lemless, actually, I remember at KubeCon, most people would be shocked that I was impressed by this. They did Jason, a wielder of mysteries, and literally protected that card for the entire game and continuously tucking it and moving it and doing basically like brainstorm to shove it down until they were ready to have it come out onto the field and win the game. Playing it completely different than I'd ever seen, basically running like a full control package of power max cards within this cube to fend off their opponents, and they 3-0'd this cube until they got Jace Wielder of Mysteries. That is not breaking the concept of this cube. If anything, that's a person that found another lane and they pushed the limits of this cube so you can go where you want. If you're happy doing werewolves in green, and I'm a huge Gruul guy, I love it, then rock on, right? But if you want to go like you're saying and play full control shell, you can do that too, because it may give the best defense to this argument. They're like, oh, that doesn't belong in Innistrad. Well, she's like, well, it is. It's the mages pulling from the winter moon. There are people that are outside of that, that realm, that mythos that you're creating, that world building that doesn't just fit to that shell of those five factions, right? These are beings that are pulling the cryptic command so that you can argue there's evil wizards on this plane. You see where I'm going with this? Like, it's part of the storytelling that kind of gets folded into these cards that you can basically give yourself an excuse to to do it anyways.
To justify.
To justify. See, this is how I do it. It's how I justify my actions. Cool stories.
My new goal for this cube that I want to do is to have a deck that has zero horror themed cards. Just be like,
The,
that
the
would be funny.
anti-horror. Everything's happy.
Yes.
I mean, you could do Bloomburrow, but then you got to worry about like now I'm starting to do Ben, the original horror movie about the rat, or now I'm doing. You see where I'm going? Everything has a horror movie. You can do Sharknado if you put a fish in there. Who cares?
Yeah.
Everything's a horror movie.
Yes. And another question that I have for you is, are there any colors or color pairs that you found harder to find mechanically unthemed things for? For example, in the
Oh
cube, I
yeah.
see blue-red Spellslinger, which when I hear blue-red Spellslinger, that doesn't come to me as much as horror sounding compared to werewolves or vampires. And also like white, like you mentioned, which I think is a really cool part of the cube, being the fighters trying to stop the horror and bring the light. But is that also a thematic choice because white often doesn't have as many horror themes in it?
Correct. So that skew, that tilt is going to lead towards humans, and it does get into the spirits, right? You can see where I kind of lean into the idea of even a few vampires, but I'm very choice on those too. I'm not counting them completely, but I can see five right here in front of me actually. Vampires, which was a little weird to me too. At first, I was like, should I integrate white vampires in this cube, right? I've kind of gotten used to this Rakdos vampire thing. It kind of gave me that trifecta that I wanted with that air quotes no longer a guild, but allowed me to integrate it into other cubes. White actually kind of did an okay job of leaning into a lot of humans, some spirits, and some vampires. I wanted the identity in white to kind of be that, like you said, the light fighting the darkness type of thing. So that's why I'm running cards like Gather the Townsfolk or Wrath of Gods even in here, which will shock people, but I've got that really cool full art. That's the reason why it's in here. Or I've got stuff like Path to Exile, which seems a little stronger, but I have that really like rich gothic looking textured art. It looks almost like an oil painting. Actually, my Swords of Plowshares falls in that too. It's very medieval art style, and it looks to me like a something you would see in like when we went to Dublin, Ireland, something you'd see in St. Patrick's Cathedral if you were looking at a stained glass window, right? You would see these two arts, and for me, that would be kind of the time period where these stories are coming about, the vampires that moved around, the zombies and the things that went in the dark were very medieval based. A lot of the stories that we've passed along through the generations arc from that. So when I'm choosing these arts, I get a vibe from when the origin story of this horror came from, and White does a great job of actually doing that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And another question that I have for you is, So I have tried to build a couple cubes that include kindred themes. For example, I had a lower to mid power cube that had zombies, spirits, vampires, elves, goblins, and I had trouble balancing it and making it not feel like it was on wheels. And there was a couple ways that I tried to make it feel less parasitic. For example, including zombies that are just really good on their own, and then a couple payoffs that maybe also produce zombies, like Liliana's Mastery, which is 5 mana enchantment, make two zombies, and your zombies get +1/+1. So it's a payoff and an enabler. Tell me about how you have managed to include kindred themes in the cube, but not make it feel super on rails and also parasitic feeling.
Yeah, so that's a great question, actually. And at first, I did the same thing you're talking about. Like the first iteration of this, when I first, shuffled up and played it, did feel like it was on rails. Everything just fell into what you'd expect it to. You started drafting Rakdos, you were playing vampires, you were doing Selesnya, you were doing humans. It literally the game was borderline playing itself, and you couldn't arch out. So I'm going to give two answers to this. The first thing, in order to make a kindred set feel a little different, isn't just to look at the types. So I've got vampires, I've got werewolves, I've got humans, I've got spirits, I have zombies, and I even have a few horrors in here, which I've been called out for recently for not having. But that's kind of just the first order of operations when I'm looking at this. The second order would be like, what is the secondary, the subtext within the card, right? The first order, the second order, and the third order. What does this card do? So I'll give you an example. So I've got a vampire here, and it's a warlock. Okay, cool. I can do stuff with that if I wanted to, if I had a lord or something. But this is Vengeful Blood Witch. And for one colorless and black, you get a 1/1 creature vampire warlock. Whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And because this cube, the power level is pretty kind of flatline-ish. I know I said I have these spikes and I've got some big splashy spells in here, but it's kind of really centered around the idea of where you expect Innistrad to land. You can get away with stuff like aristocrats. So that's kind of the second order of operations. So I have two parts that I'm checking here. Is the art fit the texture of what I'm trying to do with the environment? Does it have that feeling of dread when you're playing it? And two, does it mechanically actually help the environment? The second thing that I want to latch onto that's really problematic, and we've talked about this before on our show, is the problem with lords. When I first built this cube, I saturated it with lords. And lords like Death Baron, here's one right here. For one colorless and two black, you get a 2/2. Creature, zombie, wizard. Skeletons you control and other zombies you control get +1/+1 and have death touch. That one's fine, but a lot of times these will say other. In this case, it says skeletons you control and zombies you control, so it gives it to itself. But the vast majority of lords pass that trait on to the other creatures. So they kind of become parasitic in what they do. They're not very good at being standalone. They're just like a stats monster or basically like an anthem a lot of times. And that I oversaturated environment. So the first lesson I learned was is to kind of peel back away from the lords because the lords become kind of the catalyst for what you're talking about. Drafters see the lord, they pick up the lord, and they start building around the lord. And the lord draws you into a deck, and next thing you know, you look like you have a borderline constructed deck. And that can happen with anything, like with goblins you were talking about, like Goblin King. That's a cool card, so that's what you're going to grab. But you're not really going to play that with zombies. I mean, you could splash it, I guess, argumentatively, but it's going to look awkward, right? They don't meld together, they don't find each other. But going back to the Vengeful Blood Witch, it's a vampire. So if I have a vampire lord in here, sure, it gets a buff. It's a 2/2 now, and it maybe has some other trait. But also, it's an aristocrat. So it's allowed itself to pick off two different directions. So there's layers to each one of these cards. So you'll see a lot of text in this cube. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Like this is a very reedy cube.
Yes. And I love that answer having multiple levels. It's kind of like small brain, big brain, and then small brain again, or like getting to many different levels of it. Where first, oh, it's a vampire. Cool. Put it in. Second, oh, it fits into aristocrats. So it's on that next level, even deeper when it comes to the archetypes and creating a really sound, fun environment that's redraftable. But then you get to the third level and it's like, oh, but it's a vampire, so I can put in a couple more lords. Why not?
Yeah,
And
and then
make
you
it
could peel it back even further and say, well, it's a warlock. So if you had something that another form of a lord that looks at the idea, and I'm gonna call lord generically, another card that says warlocks and clerics and such get X, then this allows you another cross-pollination point to allow the deck builders to find these little levers and pull them themselves. That's the problem a lot of times I find with Kindred. It's too busy. You're giving them rails, you're telling them how they should play the deck, and you're making it look, unfortunately, a little strange when you put this mismatch in there. You see where I'm going with this? They can naturally fit in anything, like Tainted Adversary as a zombie, air quotes, lord. These type of cards don't have to go into a zombie deck. It can go in what you're talking about, your Dimir control deck if you wanted to use it, right? They don't need to feel stuck. That's the thing that I would advise anybody trying to build any kind of kindred or typal type or factional cube is to choose cards that allow themselves to branch off and that they have multiple layers. And there's a good article that actually just came out from our good friend Usman Jamil. And Lucky Paper Radio just published this actually today during the time of recording here. And what was cool is he's talking about Heirloom Blade and how this card at first was kind of evaluated at the highest power levels based on its only typal abilities. And this is a card that caught my eye early on for this cube in particular. But I didn't realize the second layers that that was just a raw stats card, that it could also be like a bone splinter, and that this card had more attributes than just playing into a typal type of style. But initially, I just slam it in here saying it's typal, and if you flop over your zombies after it dies, you'll hit another target, and you can put it. You see where I'm going with this, right? That secondary order of cards oftentimes can skew when you're building your actual decks, not so much just the curator, but the players necessarily don't see it. It's really cool when you start looking and go, hey, I have other opportunities for this card to branch off.
Heirloom Blade is an amazingly underrated card. I've had that in my Peasant Cube for years. It's always does so much work. It basically is, it's like Skull Clamp. It just says when the creature dies, you draw another card. It's so good.
Yeah. I'll give you another one. It's Sanguine Evangelist, Vampire Cleric. And the first word that you'll see on there besides Vampire Cleric is Battle Cry. So you could turn this into an aggro card. But when Sanguine Evangelist enters the battlefield or dies, create a 1/1 bat creature token with flying. That also gives you pieces that you can now utilize for your Aristocrats deck or your Tokens Matters themes or your counter. You see where I'm going with this. You populate whatever you want to do with it. You can expand upon each layer of this card.
Yeah. And another question that I have for you is, what have been some of the biggest difficulties that you've had with curating this cube? Like one question that I had for you is, so you have werewolves. So there are the old werewolves and also the ones with daybound, nightbound. What kind of difficulties have you experienced with curating this cube and how have you gotten around them?
So the first one was me being pig-headed and stubborn. So whenever I first added in the fully supported, at the time I believed, faction of werewolves, I presented the cube. And we played it a lot. And the people who liked werewolves, they love werewolves. But most people actually just, for whatever reason, just hate the idea of werewolves. And I get it. They're the flip cards and they don't want to deal with that and they don't want to try to figure it out. So I decided this is where I dug my feet in, pighead and stubborn. If you don't like my werewolves, you know what I'm going to do to you, Ian? I'm going to give you more werewolves. And so I shoved in more werewolves. I
Force
made
them
it
to
so
play them.
I forced you to play it. So when you're drafting and you're like, man, I want to be a zombie. No, you can also probably be a werewolf because there're going to be so many in the pack. And that was me digging my heels in on that conversation. Duskmorn and a combination of calves when we had him on the show and I looked at the Cuba Cthulhu, excuse me, really awakened my thoughts on this. And I said to myself, I do love werewolves and I want all of your listeners to like werewolves. I do in the heart of hearts, but I also have now come to accept that most of you listening don't like werewolves. Now, instead of forcing it to be a faction, they're still going to remain, and I am going to thin out the OG ones, and I'm going to go only with the modern printing or whatever. Right now, I do currently have a blend, but my intent is actually to just make them as kind of a mid-range supporting package. If you're in green, at the time of recording, you may draft a Syndicate Pack Leader if you want to, which is an incidental wolf that has some cool attributes. Or you can get basically Wolfier Avenger, and I'm not going to cut that card. It's a really good mid-range card or Master of the Wild Hunt, which is really sick. It's also in my metal cube, but this art is like one of my favorite arts of all time. Just makes wolves because wolves are terrifying. Wolves, whenever you are out in nature and you're in your snowed in cabin and you have no defensive perimeter, wolves are in packs trying to consume you as a human, right? This is one of the first reasons why people surrounded themselves around fire and made noises so that they could sleep at night to avoid wolves. Wolves just have this, it's in our DNA, in our fiber to be frightened of wolves. And I'm not talking about going to the zoo and looking at them. I'm just talking about being in the wild. There's something frightening about this idea that just goes really way back to our great great ancestors that makes this idea scary, that howl in the night frighten people. So I don't want to cut them in their entirety, but I'm going to peel back and not, force support them. I'm not going to make you, Ian, and your listeners play my werewolves anymore. I'm going to make it back into a choice, if that's fair.
Hey, this is your cube. You're in my environment. You signed up. You pay the entry. You're playing the wolves. I like
Yeah,
it.
I know, but I really, really want you to come back and play again and not be mad that I forced wolves upon you. So,
That's great. And
yeah.
let's jump into a pack one, pick one from the cube here. I'll read it off. We have Drana, Liberator of Malakir. We got Count Dracula or Sorin the Mirthless. We have Zealous Conscripts, Tainted Adversary, which we mentioned, Hell Rider, Path to Exile, Werewolf Pack Leader, Tovalar, Dire Overlord, Worn Power Stone, Necromancy, Chain Lightning, Clarion Spirit, Pyreheart Wolf, Cryptolith Rite, and Field of Ruin. So, interesting pack.
Yeah, and you've identified two of the problems or the shortcomings of a pack one pick one that I fight with. So whenever I'm sifting through trying to post, we've got a MTG drafting page that I'm one of the admins for. And I put a pack one pick ones frequently from a lot of my cubes, and specifically my power cube because it gets the most interest. And I find myself flicking through a power cube as an example, and a Moxen will come up or a Black Lotus, and I can't post that because the minute I post that, people are going to say, "Well, cool, I'll just pick your Moxen. It's a great pack one pick one, bro." Or I'll remove all them, and then they'll say, "This is not a very strong looking pack for a power cube." So I'll sift through 14 times to get something that has at least six pack one pick ones in it
I do the
before
same
I,
thing.
yeah, I think we all do that. Now, you know what? Let's put some interaction here for your listeners. When you present your pack one pick ones, I want you to reach out to Ian and let him know, do you sift through to try to get one that's at least an intriguing pack one pick one, or you just slap up any old thing and call it a day?
I
Question
always
mark.
avoid if it has a fetch land. If it has
Yeah,
a fetch
yeah.
land,
You see the problem. So
six,
you
70% of people will say, take the fetch. Don't even look at the rest of the pack.
So you have presented a similar problem with the Path to Exile, and what did you have for the other one, the Bolt Light?
Yep. Chain
Yeah.
lightning. Hmm.
Yeah, so those are pretty much just going to pick themselves. So now we need to let's move into a different layer. Let's say we've had this pack passed to us. What are we going to take? So those two cards have been removed from this pack. This is what the problem is of adding staples and highly efficient cards to your cube environment. I'm just going to say that as a flat. Would you agree with that statement?
It makes it just guaranteed pack one, pick one.
Yeah, it is. And that's okay. I'm okay with it. It's just different when you're presenting to an audience, right? Versus you just open this pack up, you're going to take that exile, you're going to pass it, and someone else is going to get the other card. But out of all of these, Drana is, in my mind, the most broken card out of that pack, besides, removing the first two. Drana can get out of control.
Huh. I have a different thought. I was thinking Count Dracula or Sorin the Mirthless would be really strong. I just felt like having a Planeswalker and a gummed up board could be really good.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it is. The reason why I didn't choose it is just because I have the intimate knowledge of this cube. The creature count's so high, the rivers are flowing. You got to really have a defensive posture to defend planeswalkers in here. I mean, the control package does exist, board wipes do exist, and they are prevalent. And the removal suite, I've toned it back on purpose, but the creatures will eventually outnumber the storm. I want Drana for that attack feature to move these games forward. The planeswalkers, a lot of times, are hard to defend, I found in this environment, just because the density of creatures alone.
Oh, Drana slaps. And BFZ, that card was like $50. That card was great.
Oh yeah, that court's dumb, and I would almost take that over. This is going to sound stupid, but I'd almost take it over the path and all that just for this reason. If you path it out, that's fine, but I'm gonna make you make a choice because it's interesting with something like that. That's a premium removal card. This creates tension, believe it or not. People, I'm curious to see what your listeners think about this, but there's tension involved. A lot of my creatures in this cube are not very big. Besides Drana, which is an obvious threat, you would path that. You realize that that has cumulative damage that will build up. But when you're dealing with something just from the red section, like Clockwork Percussionist or Falkenrath Gorger or Falkenrath Pit Fighter or Insolent Neonate, or here's one that you would pass, Stromkirk Noble, that gets out of control and grows, right? It has basically like its own built-in proliferation. But you're forced to make a choice when you're going to use this premium removal. It's not your 1 versus 7 in here.
I think Drana is just such a beautifully made card because it really takes use of first strike. When it deals damage, all the other creatures you control get plus one counters before they deal damage. I just think it's such a beautifully made card.
If I'm going to do one more pick out of this pack, it's Necromancy. The card's near and dear to my heart, and I love the ability to air quotes flash it in to snap out the thing. If you do play that control removal suite that you're talking about, you like to do, that's the type of card that I like to run to grab the opponent's thing I just took out.
Oh
So,
yeah. That was a
yeah.
really cool pack outside of the two pack one pick ones, but the third pick was cool.
Yeah. But there's still tension in those first two. It just doesn't look like it. It looks like it's an easy on wheels answer, right, to pick those two, but that's not taking the environment into context. Without knowing it, you're going to grab the power max cards because you're going to assume that the power level of those cards is basically apples to apples to the targets within the environment. And sure, they are to a degree. You do have maximum stuff that you would, like Grave Titan, you do want to path that. Sir Conrad, you do want to path that. These are all really great choices, and there are a lot of other ones in here. But the vast majority of these are low-level targets that you're going to be forced to hold. And it's not a bad thing to hold in your hand, but I mean, how many turns are you going to hold it in your hand? You see where I'm going with this statement?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tension.
And before we head into the wrap up, there's something I really want to talk about with you, which is Ubercubathon. Ubercubathon 2 is happening this year. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so April the 26th in Chapel Hill, North Carolina
My
at the Gathering
birthday.
Place. Yeah, so you should come out if you can. That's the official date of the event, right? That's the enter, don't quote me on this. I think it's 55 to sign up. The top prize is $450 is what you win. The whole top eight gets paid. So everybody playing my Power Cube gets to enjoy my Power Cube and they get paid for the more money than they spent. So it's really cool like that. Also, I'm going to be doing a free zone once you've kind of if you tumble out of the event, you get knocked out or whatever. I'm going to have a prized up free zone. We have other cubes. We have three cubes right now in that event. So everybody's going to be cubing. Nobody's going to get bored. You get knocked out of the main because that's the straight line to the 450 plus. CubeCon has been so gracious to offer us a free ticket. You want to go to CubeCon? That's going to be in Madison, Wisconsin. They're going to run it back again, and myself and UberCube will be there. So we're really looking forward to it. So in addition to that, $450. Not that money's everything, but money is pretty sweet. Secondly, you get a CubeCon ticket. And then third, and I haven't revealed this yet, I have a custom piece of art for a play mat that I'm working on. And all I'll give for the listeners right now, it's going to be my goofy little caricature type cartoony stuff that I like to do. I drew the UberCube logo. So I like to draw and I like to paint and all that. But I'm working on one that's going to be Fraggle Rock meets Schoolhouse Rock
Oh,
but Uber Cubathon. So I'm working on something goofy and a little zany. It's silly. I'm going to see how it looks. I'm almost done with it.
hey, winning this event doesn't sound too bad. You get basically your flight paid, you get your hotel paid, and you get free entry. That doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah, I mean, KubeCon, thank you very much for supporting us. KubeCon is going to be really great this year. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to go back again, and I'm pretty sure probably sometime, if I had to guesstimate, April, May-ish, they're going to start doing cubes again for submission. I highly recommend to all of your listeners to submit your cubes because this cube that we're talking about now was featured 2 years ago. And because it was featured, and I got people that like say Jamie Topples played my cube, and I had other people play this cube, and they gave me critical points. They gave me little micro lessons to make this environment better. Like it actually came up during KubeCon. Our good friend Bones, they had a judge call. You talked about this with the OG werewolves versus the modern printing of werewolves, and it created a bit of a stir, enough that made me notice, like, do I really want to continue to support this, right? And obviously I have till today's date, but I am going to thin back because these are lessons that you can't really learn in your little microcosm of 8 to 14 to 12 players, whatever you have for your play group. But opening this up to say, have your cube drafted three, four, five times by pods of eight with all that critical feedback, or maybe you're at KubeCon and you maybe get featured. You have a little bit of the world looking at your cube, giving feedback. I can't tell you how priceless that is for a cube curator. So going to these events like Uber Cubathon, stuff like that, this is where you learn. You go to these other big ones, have yours featured. I can't
Yes.
recommend it enough.
Everyone go to KubeCon. I wasn't able to go last year because of some health stuff, but I'm 100% going this year and it's going to be awesome. So,
It is so much fun.
yes. And Anthony, it's been amazing having you on this episode. I hope to have you on again soon. And
Oh, certainly.
anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I mean, other than, my usual happy cubing, and you can find us on the socials at UberCubeMTG podcast at gmail.com, or you can find us on Blue Sky. We're based on everything. We have a Discord, and I'd love to see all of you at Uber Cubathon in April 26th, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Come on out, come play with us. It's going to be fun. It's going to be in a bar, basically LGS, having drinks, the most casual, competitive nonsense you ever seen. I thought, and I'll mention this, I thought the money, Ian, would be a problem. We talked about this on one of our shows, like me saying there's X amount of dollars that, you can win for coming to my event. I was super scared of that because we don't make a single dime off this. All this money goes to the LGS to support them and that we love them, and the rest of the money goes to the players. That's it. The only thing I get is really tired. And they do give me a beer. They do actually give me maybe two beers, but it's something about it. It's just a vibe, and I love it. And I think people should get out more and start doing these homegrown. There are a lot of events. There's one in Boston. Capital Cube Championships is coming up, I believe. They're going to be running that outside the DC area. You should watch for that. That'll be in August. I'll let Lincoln post all his information, but that was a fantastic event. There's so many. These are Steel City. It's just the little homegrown events are just such a great way to meet all of us in the wild, and then let's all go to KubeCon.
Yeah, this would have already happened by the time this episode comes out, but I'll be at Vertex this weekend
Heck
in
yeah.
Philadelphia and also Cube for a Cause in Brooklyn. So
Yeah, same thing. We're going to
Cube events.
Ravenfest. We're going to Ravenfest this weekend. They have a miniature. It's in Sanford. Stu and I are actually I rushed a recording out that's coming out Monday. We put together a little short clip one that's coming out soon, just because we're going to be this weekend doing a charity event. So yeah,
That's awesome. And thank you everyone for listening. I hope you have a great day and like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And we'll see you next week.
thank you for having me on.